From standing his ground as PGA's de facto spokesperson, to feeling like he got thrown under the bus for nothing. Here's how Rory McIlroy really feels about the PGA Tour and LIV Golf merger. For quite some time now, the four-time major champion Rory McIlroy has taken up a side gig besides being a professional golfer. Not only does he take out time on Sundays to hit the links, but because of the whole drama between PGA and LIV Golf, the Northern Irishman has become the de facto spokesperson of the PGA, speaking out against LIV Golf any chance he gets. See, Rory has been the strongest voice against the Saudi-funded tour, and because of that, he's caused quite a lot of disruption too. But on the 6th of June 2023, when news broke out that the PGA Tour in Europe would be joining forces with Saudi's LIV Golf, it's safe to say that it took all of us by surprise. In fact, the announcement was so shocking that not even the PGA Tour players knew what was coming. And Rory is definitely having trouble recollecting his thoughts. Now, you've got to understand, this is Rory McIlroy we're talking about, okay? The guy who basically held an invisible megaphone in his hand and made it very clear just how much he disapproves of the controversial LIV Tour. I mean, if we take a look at all that he said in the past, he's been super consistent with what he's said since LIV teed off in 2022. Back in February 2022, when Phil Mickelson talked about how the Saudi-backed tour was reshaping how the PGA Tour operates, Rory took that personally and wasn't very pleased with what Phil said. Back then, he was so sure that the Saudi Golf League would never take off, and that instead, the PGA was striving to get better as a league. A couple of months later, though, LIV Golf made its debut in London, and Rory tried to do some damage control, accepting the fact that the new league was here to stay. He talked about how he had some of his close friends playing for the tour back then. And while he couldn't stand in their way, it wasn't something that he would do personally. In his press conference ahead of the US Open, Rory also expressed his disappointment with a couple of PGA Tour players, including Phil Mickelson, and said he was wrong for believing that people wouldn't make the jump to LIV after committing to the PGA. What's interesting about this situation is that despite being so vocal about how much he disapproved of the tour, there was a time that he urged all parties involved to hold peace talks instead. In July 2022, during an interview with the BBC, Rory talked about how the PGA Tour, LIV Golf, and the DP World Tour needed to talk things through in order to get past whatever their issue was in the first place. He also pointed out that if that happened, then it'd be a good thing for the PGA since they'd get more cash flowing into their tour. Although it was unfortunate and messy how the whole PGA versus LIV Golf situation had taken over the circuit and affected the players and their rankings, if all these top guns were going to invest billions in golf, they might as well invest inside the existing structures instead. But that still didn't stop him from standing his ground. He was convinced that there was nothing that could undo the betrayal of his former PGA mates. He really kept it civil at the 2023 Masters and got along well with Brooks Koepka and Dustin Johnson, all because the tournament was bigger than the LIV drama. Can't say anything about the rest though. Whether they're considering the merger or not, I think everyone's going to have to face the music at one point or the other. As I talked about earlier, Rory's actually talked about how the three major tours should get their heads together and work towards unifying golf and stabilizing the structures of the existing circuits. This is why it comes off as no surprise that he said that the merger was ultimately the best move for the PGA Tour. According to him, when he looks 10 years down the line, he thinks it'll be good for the game of golf. Not only does this merger unify the circuit, but it secures the PGA's financial future too. Of course, Rory's also admitted that there are a couple of mixed emotions involved, considering his history with the tour. But since the merger is in its initial stages, there are still a lot of things that need to be thrashed out, and it'll take time for things to settle down a bit. But if you think Rory's had a change of heart now that the PGA's future is safe, you couldn't be more wrong. See, again, this is Rory we're talking about, right? And even though the PGA's gotten into bed with the Saudis and all, he's still very adamant that he hates LIV and hopes it goes away. When the PGA Tour's commissioner, Jay Monahan, announced that the tours would be joining forces, it was a hard pill to swallow. I mean, after criticizing LIV for being funded by the Public Investment Fund, and then the whole deal about the Saudis sports washing golf to steer away from any kind of bad press, It sounds whack that PGA would actually take money from them at all. But Rory's gone on record to admit that he's seen what's happened in other sports and business, and that it's very hard to keep up with people that have more money than anyone else. This was obviously a jab at the Saudis, but at the same time, he also acknowledged that it was for the greater good. Back when the players first started to leave PGA for LIV because of the $100 million signing bonuses, Rory stood by the PGA and outright refused the $500 million deal he was offered. To him, his loyalty to the tour mattered more. And despite being left out in the cold, he's now hopeful that the insane amounts of money will somehow find its way to the players. Because you see, he knows that the public investment fund and the Saudis will stop at nothing to drop bank. But with the merger, there's not a lot of personal choice involved. All he can hope is that somehow the money finds its way into the game, and that it's used in the right way. Sure, there was a time when there was a lot of animosity for the LIV defectors who took the easy way out. But now that all the major leagues are won, it's going to be interesting how things play out. We know Jay Monahan refused to meet up with the Saudi golf group for 2 years before eventually giving in. But seeing how divided golf had become, I guess he knew what was best for everyone. Together with Keith Pelley and Yazir Al-Rumayyan, the trio drafted an agreement keeping the deep well of LIV funds in mind, and shook hands sealing the deal. As of now, the future's still a bit hazy for all parties involved, but Monahan's made it clear that major champions like Phil Mickelson, DJ, and Brooks wouldn't be able to waltz back onto the PGA Tour despite the merger. According to him, there will be consequences considering how their departure irreparably harmed the tour, so now it's all about the strategy on how to deal with the players going forward. Despite finding out about the deal extremely last minute, Rory still has full confidence in Monahan as commissioner, and even acknowledged the hypocrisy of the merger. He said that he told Jay that he had galvanized everyone against something, and now, just like that, he had partnered up with the very thing he fiercely opposed. Although, I guess no matter what he says now, his hands are tied, and Rory's gonna have to suck it up. I do feel bad though, because when he talked about how the merger had taken him by surprise, he admitted that he felt like a sacrificial lamb, given how the PGA switched so fast. Even at the press conference, he talked about how hard it was for him to sit up there and feel like he had been put on the front lines for nothing. But he handled the situation with grace and said that he was going to remove himself from the situation entirely and focus on how the decision's better for the game overall. Although, as an individual, there will still be a lot of conversations for him in the future. After all, he used some pretty intense words to describe LIV at one point, but let's hope nothing gets him into too much trouble. And there you have it. From feeling like he got thrown under the bus for nothing, to standing his ground against the Saudi-backed tour as PGA's de facto spokesperson, that was how Rory McIlroy really feels about the PGA Tour and LIV Golf merger.